Congratulations for the both teams to get in the quarterfinal of the Kansai 2019. And the government will have the back end of the opposition we have of San So the motion for this round is discussed believe that donors should fund local NGOs in developing countries instead of international grants in operating in these countries. So without any further ado, I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister, please open your case within 7 minutes. Here.
Since 1960s, Nepal have had tons of international NGOs. But the consequence of it was that development barely happened and economic development got expanded and the poor family got a lot more poor. In the Ebola crisis, people in Congo refused to get vaccinated from the international organizations, or in India, 1960s, culturally important forests and lands people were cherishing were destroyed by international NGOs. We know local NGOs have the future to be successful, but that currently it's lacking funding, so the donors need to fund those local NGOs. So happy to propose. In my speech, but before we move on to substantive, 3 setups that we support outside of the House. Firstly, what those NGOs exactly do in those types of developing countries. If, for example, it provides basic commodity, for example, food, water, medicine, or oftentimes those NGOs are going to do infrastructure project, for example, it's going to maintenance utility facility, or it often provides education in school, etc. stuff. But what type of developing nations are we talking about? We're talking about so-called developing nations. For example, Bangladesh, Nepal, Namibia, Congo, Kenya, those types of stuff. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm gonna take it in a minute. So those are the economically and developing nations. But thirdly, what type of international NGO, what type of feature NGO the international NGO tend to have? It's likely to be Western NGOs, because privileged individuals living in the Western nations are likely to fund those international organizations. We don't see African NGO operating in current situation. They are currently lacking funds. That's why we're saying that we should fund those local NGOs. And there are 2 metrics for this to assessing the donation. Firstly, effectiveness in improving the quality of life living in those areas in a moment, quality of life that is living in those developing nations. But secondly, reflection and representation of the interest living in those people. But I'm going to prove how local NGO can better achieve that on our side of the house. Before moving on to substantive, yes?
2 clarifications. First, who is the donator? And secondly, who assesses such kind of effectiveness? Please define these kinds of things.
Who affect the effectiveness? For us, for the first one, we're talking about various factors, even ordinary individual, whether it be corporations, even ordinary individual or wealthy individual or life individual. How that affect effectiveness? I'm going to prove the mechanism through my speech. So moving on to the conditions on NGOs. So moving on, no, thank you. Moving on to the substantive. There are 2 key conditions for NGO to be successful in developing nations. Firstly, mutual trust between the local citizens and NGO operating in those areas. What is important? Through analysis. Firstly, we need local funds to be actually effectively operating those nations, which means that when we lack trust from the local citizens, local people, even local government are reluctant to fund those NGOs. B, people are not going to utilize this service, even if the NGO are successfully operating in those services, which makes it impossible for those NGOs to make activities in those areas in the first place. But see, when we lack trust from those people, we can hire local employees, which is important for those NGOs to be properly operating in those areas, which understand the culture and language that people are forced in those areas. Second condition, those NGOs need to be understanding the needs of the people living in those developing nations. Because when we imagine the term of development, it's just ambiguous. It means a lot of things. It means economical development, it means development and education. Even in the economic sphere, people have various needs on what type of exactly economic sphere that they need. Those, for example, whether some people might prioritize preservation of the culture over the economical development. So we think that that's 2 key conditions. But how Western organization is extremely bad at this? For analysis. Firstly, there's less mutual trust between the local citizen and the international NGO. Because local citizens are going to see this international NGO as they're trying to impose development. They're trying to developing us. Because there's akin to this structure of colonization, right? People in developing nations have visceral memories of actually, for example, inherited by the parents or even inherited from those past generation that are actually embedded by developed nations. Actually, politicians in Kenya often use this anti-colonial rhetoric to gain votes from the citizens. No, thank you. Therefore, when foreigners are actually trying to develop in those people there, people have this instant connection with foreigners invading them with that thing. And when those people try to utilize, for example, technology, that's why people are actually rejecting that. But secondly, people have no idea of motive of the people NGO operating in those areas. Then thank you. Those NGOs do not even understand cultural language in those areas. They feel like they're actually colonized. They feel like they're actually trying to extract the resources from the nation. No, thank you. Conclusion that we draw from this is that they're likely to be, for example, boycott or not utilize the services from those nations. What happened in Nepal is that actually it has a lot of international organizations in the beginning of 20s, but people hardly used it. But in Ebola crisis, Doctors Without Borders couldn't function. They were even shut out from the border because people thought that if they're trying to, vaccine was a poison, and people actually refused to utilize the service. With that analysis, there will be less representation inside of those areas because people are actually, the international organization is likely to comprise a privileged individual, which structurally make it hard for them to understand the needs of the people. Two analysis. Firstly, one analysis actually, because fundamental lack of shared experience, right? Those people actually live in developed nations, which means that, for example, they're less likely to understand, for example, the forest or culture, language that the local people have forced for intergenerationally. No, thank you. But fourth analysis, corruption happens because shareholders about those international organizations have this commercial incentive. Because owners, thank you, because the commercial incentive, which means that, for example, in various countries, there will be less representation of local individual instead of those international organizations. They're likely to be up here in the discussion table in the first one. No, thank you. Which means that corruption, for example, bribery or blanchie, less transparency happening in current situation. But fifthly, no, thank you. We think that relatively they're like those type of analysis. But how local NGO is better at this? Few analysis. Firstly, there are more mutual trust between just those citizens because they actually understand, they deeply understand knowledge or the culture that those people actually foster and foster in those areas. But secondly, they feel that an equal position, people in the equal position that have shared experience of living in developing nations are trying to helping us. But thirdly, most importantly, they understand reflection of the needs. They have to actually share daily experience in those developing nations, which means that those local employees, officers know what exactly people need. For example, people need the water in this specific area, or people who want to prioritize this forest or culture in this area, so we're not going to include to destroy that such a specific needs. But why this funding is actually necessary? Because although those local NGOs have a lot of features to be successful, currently it's lacking funding because Western NGOs are currently dominating funding. But that's why we think the Western capital is currently lacking funding. In order for them to be successfully operating in those areas, we need funding for those people. So we think the donation fund those local NGOs compared to international NGOs.
Thank you for understanding the directive goal for the read of the position. Please open your case within 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to argue from our opposition bench is that simply this debate is about, given that there is money being donated to each organizations, which side can better utilize it for the better being of the people, right? People we need to support. And we think, ladies and gentlemen, that there are certain capabilities that local NGOs do not necessarily have, and these make it very important that we actually donate it to internationals. Internationals are far better in doing far better in some circumstances in bringing better goods to societies we need to help. Ladies and gentlemen, we think at the end of the debate, we think these are very important issues to notice. Now, I'm going to give a couple of reasons why we think that there are limitations of local NGOs compared to international ones. For example, like the capabilities they have in terms of the money and the people they can utilize, in terms of like there being global eyes on the activities of internationals, not necessarily on locals. Also, better governance system that we have in international ones make it far better for people to donate. Now, before going into these issues, I'm going to give a couple of rebuttals to what we heard from the previous speaker. Now, he has told us that hearing the needs on the ground is very important. Local people may have different needs from what we think in the West. Now, we think, ladies and gentlemen, the characterization of international NGOs is that they don't just operate in Switzerland or in America. They have local branches like many multinationals, ladies and gentlemen, which means that you do have people of the same color, same color of skin, same languages and same cultures who can actually go into the ground and hear the needs, ladies and gentlemen. Also, ladies and gentlemen, we told their logic was that there's not going to be mutual trust because they know that it's Western money coming in. They also said Western money is going into locals anyway. So what is the difference here? We didn't really hear a solid logic here. Ladies and gentlemen, also, we heard from them that you can't even hear the needs because you're being locked out of that nation in the first place. That only happens in places like North Korea, ladies and gentlemen. The vast majority of the examples they have given themselves, like Namibia, they do accept a lot of international NGOs, ladies and gentlemen, and we think that this logic doesn't really stand. Also, if you're talking about states where nobody can go in and observe, how do you check the effectiveness, ladies and gentlemen, that they themselves have raised as the criteria of judging this debate? We think it's just going to be like these local NGOs having cheap home pages saying that we're doing all these good things. How do you think that is going to be effective, as they said? Ladies and gentlemen, also what we heard was that reflection of local wills is fundamentally important. But the thing is, they didn't really tell us why that is important in the first place. We think often these NGOs, local ones, are run by local leaders who are attached to certain ideologies or religions, ladies and gentlemen. What that means is that they have a tendency to ignore things like women's rights, ladies and gentlemen, or support to the poorest areas, so minorities, ladies and gentlemen. All of these are likely to be neglected. Why is this an important criteria to judge? It's because we think that the motivation of people donating to NGOs is to help humanity. And humanity doesn't change whether you are a woman or not, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore it is important that we donate to international ones. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, even if I accept that local ones, also ladies and gentlemen, even if we accept that local ones are so good, ladies and gentlemen, they should work in cooperation and a partnership under the support of international ones, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't think they have given us why that is not the case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, note it down, let's look about the capabilities. As I already told you, they have a network globally, international ones I'm talking about. International, like Human Rights Watches, Oxfam's, food aid program, many of them, they have local branches everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what that means is that they don't not only have the local intelligence who can hear these on the ground, it means that they can actually gather people from all over the world. Now, why is this important? It's because when you actually want to operate in a certain country, there's necessity to understand like the local laws, ladies and gentlemen, or local how the local politics is moving on, ladies and gentlemen. And then you can actually have a lot of professionals who can do accounting, who understand the general accounting principles in these countries, who know about the law there, ladies and gentlemen, to actually get things moving on the ground. Often these activities of the NGOs become political, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why this is very important. Now, in local nations, they may say that local elites would join local NGOs. Is that really the case? Local elites who are lucky enough to get education, they often choose to work for multinational corporations, not necessarily NGOs, because they think they want to move out of the hunger and the suffering the poverty that they're suffering on the ground. That's why local elites, not many of them, would actually join NGOs in the first place. And if they are to join NGOs, they would probably go for more authoritative ones, like international ones, and that's why international ones are far better. Ladies and gentlemen, second issue, better global watches. Ladies and gentlemen, local NGOs, they don't really have a method of voicing out their concerns. All they have is like a probably very cheap homepage, which are very good on the front page, but nothing is linked underneath, ladies and gentlemen. In this kind of situation, you can't really see the needs of them internationally. Also, there are less watches on these local NGOs. Local NGOs may exist in many numbers, not many people are going to read it, read all of this. Compared to that, international ones, ladies and gentlemen, they have more of an obligation to voice out. They have in their constitution that they are going to annually report what they have done and how effective they measure their actions were, ladies and gentlemen. Also, we see that many of the posts shared on Facebook and Twitter also are derived from the homepage posts of these many international NGOs. Yes, sir. Given these all analysis to prove why international one is better, how do you explain the fact that actually international one has been making disparity between poor and rich far more quicker in countries like Nepal? Engage with the reality. The reality is you can't just point to one failure where this has happened. You can't really explain the mechanism why that actually happened. Yeah. And we think we have many more reasons from Yonaga to tell you why that is not. Right. Lastly, better governance systems, ladies and gentlemen. Now, locals ones, as I already told you, they are often run by local leaders, ladies and gentlemen, and they are far less accountable. Now, compared to that, we think that they are not that accountable because they're linked to certain ideologies. Now, when you have international ones, there is always ongoing interest of many people watching it. So a lot of people may criticize that this is only going to be pro-West. That therefore there's a force to knock back their action to become more or less culturally biased, ladies and gentlemen. And that's very important. Also, in terms of the money that they can collect. Now, as I told you that when you have unaccountable fundraising, a lot of people is not going to donate to unaccountable ones, which are not going to report what they have done, ladies and gentlemen. So in that case, we think the international ones are far more likely to collect money. At the end of the day, we have given you all these reasons of why international ones are good. Ladies and gentlemen, we beg to oppose.
Second date of the session next to the PM, so please deliver a speech within 7 minutes. Paper.
I'm going to elaborate two issues in this speech. First of all, in terms of the international non-government organization, what is their incentive and why international NGO are likely to fail? And secondly, I'm going to talk about in terms of the local NGO, where they are likely to succeed inside of that countries, and I'm going to respond to the refutation from the leader of opposition. But before that, I have several independent responses to the previous speakers. So first of all, the previous speaker said it is unclear how we can check the effectiveness of these local NGO and so forth. But we think that simply we can assess such effectiveness even local NGO. For example, these local NGO have to actually accountable to the countries, that developing nation itself, and they have to develop what actually they are doing and so forth. And also, the people on the ground can actually assess the activity of this local NGO. If local NGO is failing or they are misusing the money, these people inside of the developing nations can check, and if that is some have failures, they can actually reject the NGO and so forth. So we think that this check and balance can actually happen. Thank you. And also the previous speaker said anyway the local people will reject the money from the Western nation, or money from the Western nation. But we think that it's not the case, right? And first of all, the money generation itself is invisible. But what we want to say is that actually this international NGO, which is based on this Western nation, are actually actually acting inside of the developing countries. This is really visible, and the nation, the people in that developing nation think that this is really the same structure as the past colonization and so forth, and they actually hate that behavior of the international NGO. So we think that that's the exclusive difference from the outside house and the outside house. Thank you. Move on to my first point. Yes.
Do you have any example, the local NGO in the Nepal or sometimes other places? If you say, you can check it, please name of the NGO.
Sorry, I don't know. We want to my first point. In terms of international organization. So we think that as our Prime Minister elaborated, the international organization are less likely to deeply know the needs of the local people, and mutual understanding is less likely to happen. And also as I said before, even if this international NGO has a lot of branches in a lot of countries, anyway, their base is on the Western countries, right? And they are paternalistically developed these developing countries, right? We think that this structure itself is really making it hard to make the mutual understanding from NGO and local people. And also, since this international NGO has the one base organization, they even if the donors donate lots of money to this international organization, we cannot guarantee the whole money can be utilized inside of only one country. So I think that in terms of the effectiveness and international organization is not so trustworthy. And then let's move on to the second point about local government, right? As the leader opposition said, the local government is more likely to succeed inside of the developing country. This is because we can make the mutual understanding, and people inside of that countries are likely to accept the local NGO, and and then we think that they are likely to success. And the leader opposition have said, right, local government, comparatively local government have no money and no human resources, and comparatively, whereas the international organization can have a lot of human resources and so forth. But we think that situation will gradually change. In our paradigm, lots of donors will donate a lot of money to the local government, which means that local government can also hire a lot of professors or experts from external world. Then we think, no, thank you. Anyway, this local government can more successfully develop that nation. And also, the previous speaker were talking about accountability, but as I responded before, we can also guarantee the accountability of this local NGO. And also, we're talking about since there is leader inside of the developing nation, this NGO really local NGO is vulnerable to the leader's opinions. But I don't understand that point, right? This actually local NGO is independent organization even within the nation. So I think that these organizations are less likely to be influenced by these leaders, and comparatively, the international NGO are more likely to misuse the money. This is because their unique incentive, like they have to care other shareholders in the other nations and so forth. So we think that local NGO can effectively use their money. And lastly, about the influence of the local NGO. The point of the leader opposition was that since these local NGO have less advertisement power, or they only have cheap home page and so forth, they cannot have big influence. But also we think that this can be gradually changed within our program because of that lots of donation. They can use resources to hire people and also to advertise their activity and to get more money from the external world. For those reasons, we think that definitely local NGO is better than international one.
15 p.m. Next, deputy leader of the opposition, please deliver a speech within 7 minutes. Please.
Up the parts of the characteristic of the local NGO doesn't necessarily affirm the collective necessity of local NGO instead of international NGO, given the leader of opposition gave the logical explanation as to how they are more able to give the holistic support with godly the international connections, which really didn't see any responses from the Aoyagi, and B, and then like those kind of the international, let's say like bonding or the name that will be the source of the trust and for the scale out and more movement, and which is also I didn't get the response from DPM. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, like just a nitpicking approach from the government doesn't necessarily affirm the collective necessity to introduce this policy, and this is the the very thing that we're going to hear from the government whip, although government whip is not allowed to form any constructive approach. So, as a deputy leader of opposition, I'm going to do several things. Firstly, and I'm going to tell you, assuming there's some unique room for them, local NGO to exclusively sneak in, and why this policy will turn out to be counterproductive, because this policy will significantly tarnish the integrity of the local NGO, and this is the concern coming from the Prime Minister as well. And secondly, I'm going to tell you in a more holistic level as to why the entire net sum of the donation and will significantly got decreased, and which gives you the damages towards the lives of the citizens on the ground. Before that, several clarifications and responses. Clarification number one, there's a characterization of the donor. Ladies and gentlemen, the main character of the donor is the persons who are not affiliated with particular regions, mainly the Western rich persons. Precisely because let's say those kind of economical gap between the West and those countries who need NGO, and then only the rich countries such as West has a capability to actually issue the donors, and this is important. And secondly, the NGO is not profitable organizations. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, issuing share is not the available strategy that an NGO can take, which is only allowed for the corporate entity. That's why the issue of the interest of shareholders or the corruption followed by that is nothing but nonsense. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, the whole majority of the question provided by the side of government is happening from the ignorance. That's why the region doesn't necessarily take care of that. Thirdly, those kind of main job of the NGO, majority part of the job of the NGO is to help out or mitigate the tragedy happening right now. This is not necessarily leads to the healthy development and ensurement of that. WFP or Red Cross and those kind of the entities working to mitigate the possibility is not necessarily accountable for the healthy development. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, the description coming from the leader of opposition is quite meaningful and in ensuring the job of the NGO. That's why if you think the local development or the healthy development is the primary issue, and you need to define why this is the particular framework that NGO needs to subscribe. Well, although we didn't hear that. Next responses. Firstly, Nepal. Ladies and gentlemen, just a consequential explanation that didn't necessarily affirm the particular necessity of a local NGO, especially in the context of the Nepal and in one of the weakest country in the ASEAN nations, and where have the weak polity and more possibility of the corruption and less possibility to intervene into the politics because of the strong vested interest. We doesn't necessarily condemn the existence of the international NGO for the widening poverty gap or whatnot. So that's why this is their burden to prove why it's happening in the collective manner, and because of the existence of the international NGO. Lack of explanation, we recognize. And moreover, ladies and gentlemen, in the comparison, opposition side tell you in the logical and empirical manner as to how the collaboration with the local subsidiary and the consultancy and coming from the headquarters is more beneficial. For instance, to fight back against the Nepal's corruption, and what we need is just not the human resources and the local arena. What we also need is a series of the jurisprudence and knowledge related to that, and which is only available with the international connections that was ensured in the international NGO. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, in the logical manner, the collaboration of the local approach and happening by the local subsidiary and the consultancy services happening from headquarters, and it has a more possibility to holistically ensure the betterment and towards the mitigation of the tragedy happening right now. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, the issue of the Nepal, A, does not necessarily affirm the motion, and B, they have the burden to theoretically prove and why this is structurally superior at the end of the day. So, argumentation. Firstly, even if we concede and there are some unique room for them to sneak in, but why this is counterproductive? According to the explanation from the Prime Minister, so those kind of the less attachment towards the authoritative figure or the Western figures is particularly important characteristic of a local NGO. But that's why, ladies and gentlemen, for instance, the Kenya Educational NGO is successful because they don't have any relationship towards the adverse figures against the Kenyatta and the current president of the Kenya. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, those independence is a quite important characteristic according to the side of government and to ensure the move on a healthy movement of NGOs. But what we see in the aftermath, those individual figures, and particularly Western figures, directly support the local NGO, and then it allows them, those authority, to use the rhetoric of A, anti-colonialism, or B, a particular invasion of the Westerners, and towards the movement of those local NGOs. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we think those kind of the activity conducted by the local NGOs has a much more possibility to be interrupted, or let's say a sabotage by the local authority, according to their explanations. For instance, the European University in Hungary, which is funded by George Soros, and got severe attack by the President Osborne on the Hungary, and by using the anti-colonial rhetoric, and which ultimately make them cede the existence of the European University. Those kind of the things were more likely to happen under their paradigm. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, even if we recognize the exclusive room for them, but it's ultimately damaging, according to their explanation, and we think it's toxic. And more importantly,
You're the one said theoretical explanation is important. So just give me the reason why that probability of anti-colonial rhetoric are more likely on our paradigm. Not just showing you one example.
Based on your logic, because those kind of the local authorities have the incentive to ensure its own polity or whatnot. This is the Prime Minister said, and why it's not uniquely applied to the local NGO, given those kind of direct relationships gonna be funded. And even in the worst cases, and then those local NGOs may be funded by the international NGO, but we think it's relatively better because we didn't see the direct relationship to the Western figure because those kind of the funds will be bypassed by the international NGO, which is less those kind of the Western figures, and because it works in an international manner. So that's why even in the worst case, in a comparative manner, we see the more possibility for the healthy trickle down even towards the local authorization. Lastly, the issue of the entire secession of the movement. Ladies and gentlemen, leader of opposition has told you those kind of the assessment ensured by the trust is particularly important for those donators to conduct the vote. Because especially the leader of opposition has told you not only those the public rights, but also the mandate for the report financial condition that towards the local authority is uniquely happening in their paradigm. And then, the Deputy Prime Minister said, no, local NGO is accountable towards the country. But ladies and gentlemen, those countries are basically corrupted according to their explanation, how those healthiest accountability will be ensured in their paradigm at the end of the day. And that's why the decrease of the trust significantly damages the more incentive for the donors to keep donating towards the movement at the end of the day. And that's why the issue of the donation and will significantly be seceded. For all those reasons, we are very proud to post.
For the government week, please deliver a speech within 7 minutes. Take care.
Two issues. First of all, I want to analyze the exclusive characteristic as well as comparative advantage of local NGO versus international NGO, because I think both NGO have probability of failing or succeeding. So I want to analyze in which area of development they are superior to each other, but not such as accountability or representing people's will or ideology, that sort of trapped. But second of all, assuming international one would be pretty much better than local NGO, I want to analyze the ways in which local people are going to perceive that NGO and how they interact with local citizens. First of all, exclusive nature of actors. First primary concern for Washington side was that accountability, because international law has more international exposure, therefore accountability and the usage of money are guaranteed. Four responses. First of all, intuitively not true. International organizations such as, IMF has huge problems of inefficiency and transparency, because actually 50% of ODA by international funding, for example, are actually misused, and actually we cannot have track record how these monies are used. But there is a logical reason why that is true, because they are international organizations, so there is local branches, as they told us in this way, right? Which means that it's kind of easy for these people in that local organization to just hide malfeasance, for example, because accountants, for example, are able to just swap the like something written in a balance sheet, for example. And also because there are many branches, there are many financial transactions between each branch, for example. That's making it difficult for another for these people to have track of it. But furthermore, they told us local NGO have cheap web banner. I think international one has also cheap web banners such as UNESCO, right? You question said, can you name local NGO? The point here is we can name international one, but we are not sure how they're using money exactly. We cannot see the balance sheet, for example, even if we are donor, right? And also, I'm pretty sure the reason Awagi doesn't know any example of local NGO is because he's not donor, but because we're talking about donor, right? We have incentive to check whether local NGO is good or not. As donor, because everyone told us international organizations are better in terms of accountability, because donor have incentive to check whether they're efficient or not. Presumably, same logic applies for local NGO, right? Donor have incentive to check whether or not this local NGO is doing good or not, right? The mechanism of the check and balance was not, international exposure, media exposure, net social networking system, that sort of stuff. I think that's not mutually exclusive which our side has as well, right? Because this donor have incentive to check, we don't know whether or not local citizens in there actually being pleasant with the existence of local NGO or whatnot. I don't see much accountability and exclusivity in terms of that point as well. But furthermore, local government, right? They have to submit balance sheet as well. The conclusion I want to draw here in this way here is this: none of the logic from leader option is not that exclusive to international one in terms of accountability. So I'm not quite sure of the numerical extent of the differences in terms of accountability. Therefore, I'm not quite sure consequently why the accountability bit of that is much more important in this debate. But second, I want to talk about ideology and minority representation. That's sort of a chat. Leader of option said, but local elite are not going to join this NGO anyway, more likely to join, international if we're ever going to do that, right? The point here is, that's exactly the problem. Because international NGO have incentive to maybe hire local workers, but the way in which they're going to select these workers are very biased, right? They want to hire people who are privileged, educated, and more. And these people tend to be men of ethnic majority, right? Because that selection biases takes place, which means that international one is going to also hire people who are extreme partial and biased as well. Here's the contrast here, right? Local NGO have genuine incentive to help each other. That's the reason why there are feminist NGO in the operated since 1970s in the status quo. No, thank you, because these are the people who are minority, who want to help other minority and peers as well. That's why, for example, not from rich family, but middle class farmer form NGO in Nepal and try to help each other because they understand each other's situation. They have shared experiences. No, thank you. That's why these local NGO can be also altruistic to other people and represent minority voices in the status quo. And also, no thank you, empirically not true, right? Because this international NGO, the way in which they assess the level of development, for example, is already skewed because they use macroeconomic analysis. They just understand what's the total benefit of that development project. Well, no, that's the reason, for example, these NGOs tend to have big infrastructure projects, for example, but that can destroy land forests which are used by poor farmers. That's actually happened in Nepal. That's the logical explanation, not one example. No, thank you. But also, I want to talk about market research stuff, right? International NGO have incentive to check and have market research of local citizens. That's not also that exclusive to local NGO as well, right? First of all, local NGO also have incentive to have market research, because if you're going to start NGO, you want to make sure that your NGO will succeed. Obviously, they have vast majority of researches, but also second of all, you want to hire competent persons to some extent. People have some kind of know-how and knowledge of how to develop our nations, how to help people there. I'm not quite sure why that comparative advantage of international one is so much huge on their side of the house. No, thank you. And that's why we conclude that, yes, it might be true that international one might have slight advantage in terms of accountability, I don't know, market research or representation or minority, etc., etc. But ultimately, I'm not quite sure of the extent of that and why that extent is important and that they have to explain.
Given the global scrutiny and in the eyes of the global citizens, it's much more harsh than some partial local the people. And how those the biases will uniquely happen towards the international organization, given the scale of the scrutiny, is much less in your sample.
Thanks for a reminder or for the rebuttal I just was to forget. So the point here is accountability, right? The question is, why is accountability necessary? Maybe accountability is necessary because NGO have inclination to be abusive or corrupted. The point here is they have never explained the reason why local NGO are tend to be and prone to be abusive, corrupted to begin with, right? They have to explain why local NGO are going to be corrupted, therefore we need accountability, right? In order for them to claim that accountability is the metric for this debate, they have to explain why that is necessary in the first place, right? We won't have to lose the debate about accountability because they have never given us the reason why local NGO are inherently bad, corrupted, and unaccountable at all. No, thank you. Lastly, but let's assume the best case scenario of their side house, right? Let's say international is obviously better. The point here is, we have given you the reason why trust is important from Prime Minister. Because otherwise people don't use it, don't fund it, people are just going to shut down that resource. Oftentimes government shut down, right? The point here is, we heard the response to this idea, right? We heard from DLO and LO that maybe, Western donor is donating, so anyway this NGO is going to be seen, local NGO is going to be as payment of international one. First of all, why? Because we're just getting money, right? And this money is controlled by local people there. People are going to be feel like they're colonized again. But second of all, the point here is the thing here is the probability of comparison of probability, right? Under option paradigm, if money is coming from Western world, but also that's also used by people who are the branch of Western corporation. It's supposed to money of Western, but this branch itself is not Western. That's the comparative, and the probability is more likely to side with our side house. But lastly, we heard from option side, so they told us, international one hire local people, so people don't have anti-colonial resistance. The point here is, people is going to anyway see this local people hired by international one as traitor or who are manipulated by international one. These local people hired by international one is not trusting us but siding with Western colonizer. Here comes argument from Matthew, where he explained many examples how mistrust result in a situation where people refuse to have even vaccination or collaborate with this local NGO. Even if international one is better theoretically, they have to explain why that will be trusted, used by people. It's not good for them to explain that there are theoretical advantages, they have to explain what kind of benefit we created on their side of the house. Back to propose.
Next, I'd like to go to opposition with. Please deliver your speech within 7 minutes. Speaker.
Tons of new material coming from the government with very busy to engage. At least maybe you have to note that. Tons of new material, and I think it's not good things. But anyway, the crucial area coming from the government side is lack of illustration about the local NGO. Who is the local NGO? What kind of jobs they doing? There's nothing illustrated by the government side. But on the other hand, from the leader of the opposition, we already told you the characteristic of the local NGO is, for example, like maybe the local leader or local educated people doing such kind of things. And how to say? Some of the cases, so these kinds of local NGO is bonds to, how to say, the local religion, or maybe the local races, or maybe the local some groups or so forth. In such kind of situations, the corruption is rather happen. We already told you again and again. They totally miss and ignore the engagement. Also, anyway, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about the local NGO and international NGO. At the first place, they never ever explain what is a local NGO and also what is the international NGO. On that level, we already win. But anyway, I have to speak maybe more 6 minutes, so let me do something. Yeah. Firstly, about the problem. So initially, the Prime Minister said about the problem is under the current situation, nothing changed. We have to change something, yeah. But I don't think so. Why is that? Because they totally misunderstood the NGO's primary role. That is not the developing country or changing country dramatically. The majority of the NGO's work, or how to say the job, is not changing everything. They're helping people who do not have food, or maybe who don't who cannot receive the medication or education. So such kinds of things is not dramatically changing the situation, but at least they can survive, or maybe they can receive the fundamental medication or so forth. In such kind of situation, even current situation, the international NGO and local NGO is somehow working, because some people can get the money, the food or education in maybe the Congo or Kenya or some places. So therefore we say, even under the current situation, the NGO framework is at least working. And the changing Nepal dramatically or making the economy very better, I think it is not the job of the NGO. I think it is the job of the government or sometimes the other actors. So therefore we say their problem itself is not related to this motion at the first place. So this motion is about, my partner already told you, so after taking this proposal, the tons of the money coming into the NGOs, and who and how, which actor can utilize these kinds of tons of the money, compare tons of the money. So that is the comparison happen in this debate. And so, Madam Speaker, so our side present you the tons of example to you. Firstly, about the corruption. So in terms of the corruption, so their Tamarakun's explanation about how international NGO is corrupting, yeah, I think somehow, or at least maybe some things is some part of such kind of idea is maybe true. But the thing is, the debate is a comparison. Please think about the local NGO. We don't know who they are, and also we cannot check the financial report or annual report at the first place. In such kind of situation, relatively, the international NGO is better compared to such kinds of local one. Because if you go to the UNESCO or WFP's homepage, you can see the financial report or annual report. But on the other hand, local NGO, you cannot check it. So in such kinds of situation, local NGO, they do not have incentive to showing and caring about the international or other person's eyes. But on the contrary, international NGO has an incentive to care about the international criticism or sometimes the other things. And rather than we say, the structure itself is totally different. My partner already told you, the local NGO's reader is maybe not changing, but the international NGO is international, which means such is rotating the seat of these kinds of NGO's reader. So the corruption happens when the leader stay very long, or means some members stay very long. But the thing is, the international NGO is that you can change or rotate these kinds of people at the first place. So in such kind of situation, corruption will not happen, and will not happen, or relatively will not happen compared to the local NGO. So therefore we say, in terms of the corruption, the international NGO is better than local NGO. So therefore we say, we are very happy to giving the money to international NGO. And moreover we say that colonialism argument coming from the Hikaru before the get-go.
Why is international donor do not have any incentive to require a degree of accountability, such as balance sheet, to this local NGO?
Yeah, that is a problem. So therefore, international one is better because they have to make the financial sheet or so forth, and everyone can check it. I don't know what he said. Sorry, my English is not good. But anyway, so about the colonialism argument. So firstly, what is the relationship between the colonialism argument coming from this side? I think not important one. But the thing is, even in such criteria, the Yonaka already told you that after taking the proposal, such kind of uniqueness of the local NGO will disappear. Why is that? Because Tamara-kun said, yeah, it's just money. But the thing is, by utilizing that money, you can buy maybe the food or medication or sometimes the other things. And local, very conservative people see, oh, this NGO become very rich, and they bring maybe the medicine or food or maybe the very good bag or better clothes. By seeing these kinds of situations, the local people can see, oh, they get the money, but from where? The only answer is West. And in such kind of situations, the people can notice, and the local NGO lose the uniqueness of these kinds of things. And rather more we say, it is enough to see the fact that these kinds of local NGO getting the money from Bill Gates or so forth, the local reader, for example, like the Hezbollah or maybe the Taliban. So they hate the American people. So in such terms, the leader can see, oh, they get the money and you cannot enter my area. So such kinds of things happen. So therefore we say, Madam Speaker, the characterization and illustration is rather better. And moreover we say that this proposal killing counterproductive the uniqueness of local NGO. So therefore we say we are very proud to oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Whip. Next, I'd like to call upon the Opposition Whip. Please summarize this debate within 4 minutes. Here.
I'm kind of surprised from the government as to how actually they can say a lot of material without any kind of business. And they keep saying that more trust because people have a similarity or the altruistic or focusing on local issues without telling us as to how certain the things would be with what kind of logics and how international organizations is incapable of providing those services. Although the side of opposition consistently told you did not reach none of the uniqueness coming from the local NGO isn't really covered under the power of the international NGOs. And what they lack from their side of the house is to show the collective proposition towards the motion as to how local NGO is collectively better with the characteristic of them and compared to the power of NGO. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, those things pointing out each characteristic doesn't necessarily affirm the motion. This is the very thing I said in the past speech, and no responses coming from their side of the house. So let's examine this debate in following in this manner. Firstly, and examine the virtue of the local NGO coming from their side of the house, and which is significantly reasonless. And secondly, I can examine the bias of local NGO, and which relates to the beauty of international NGO, and which are the insufficient responses from the side of the government. So starting with the virtue according to them. Ladies and gentlemen, there are several explanations from the side of government as to how local NGO can be a good actor. And for instance, in the case of the more trust, and because people have similarity and towards the people on the ground, the legal opposition has already covered, and the existence of the international NGO can be supported by local subsidiaries, for instance, the UNICEF Japan, or those kind of local subsidiaries that are already existing, and the people are working to understand the culture of the language, and no responses from their side of the house. And that's why it has nothing unique to support the existence of local NGO at the expense of international work. Secondly, the altruistic, and they don't have any biases, and that's why unlike the international NGO, they hire a female, or let's say like the altruistic, female feminist persons, whatnot. First of all, few explanations as to how certain that would be. I already pointed out in the POI as to the issue of the coverage and the power of the scrutiny, and the international NGO has much under the high tension of the global circumstances in terms of the financial report, in terms of the public scrutiny, and we didn't see any incentive for the international organization to be abusive as government will be exaggerated in the first place. And second, and they do no explanations as to how actually the local NGO can ensure that. They just mention altruistic, but leader opposition has already preempted that the local NGO and it can be run by the local leaders, and which also has a private incentive, and given the lack of the accountability which is collectively happening, those kind of the more room of the corruption, and it can be recognized the existence of those local NGOs. Thirdly, and therefore they're talking about the focusing to local situations. But Prime Minister themselves, and he says, and those international NGO and it was denied by the Congo, and for the instance of vaccination, this is the very introduction of their side of the house. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, it's empirically true that those international NGO can cater to the welfare of the people on the ground. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, none of the virtue from their side of the house is meaningfully exclusive, and which exclusively support the existence of local NGO. Let's look at the bias. Accountability. This is one of the very things that is proposed by the side of opposition. And then, like we already told you in the DLO, which I get a significantly lack response from the government with, that the trust is a very incentive for them to keep donating because they don't want to be used for the corruption. That's simple. And then like the DLO, TPM try to argue about the, let's say, countries check are existing, but we have already told you those countries are with a food which needs NGO and has a basically unstable politics, and that's why the ensuremental accountability is highly less likely compared to the international ones. In terms of the integrity and to conduct the services under the local situations, we've already told you those integrity will significantly be tarnished, and because of the direct relationship to Western donor, and which gave the no responses from the government other than why? Because the US side has said those kind of the corruption and it can be happening by the anti-colonial logic or whatnot. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we are the one who proved to you international NGO is more accountable and more functioning, and then local NGO isn't, or even if it's going to be damaging with the introduction of this particular policy. Proud of us.
Thank you, but the very next government advocate, Tamara will speak within 4 minutes. Here.
Three failures coming from the entire opposition side. Firstly, they totally lack theoretical explanation as to support their own logic. Because their lack of illustration of how the international organization actually operate, or local organization actually operate, and what they do in local area. We have tons of examples of like Congo, India, Nepal, and like Ebola example. Like they accuse us for saying like we lack illustration, they prove how those part of that evidence is not applicable for this debate. But the thing is that they do not even have that evidence on their side of the house. Well, example on their side of the house. Like we're decided giving the example and theoretical explanation behind that. But secondly, opposition totally assumes this local leader, this theories as like appeal on intuition, right? They talk about how protection of the minority, how exclusion of minority happens, those local workers, leaders are incompetent, accountability, chief website, those types of stuff. They actually didn't explain why. Just Shiku knows, they didn't explain why. But thirdly, the lack of response to the government whip. Because government whip literally spend vast majority of his speech explaining why the vast majority of material coming from their side of the house is not even exclusive to this comparison of local government and NGO. For example, firstly, accountability. For example, if the incentive to donate, donors are not going to change on either of the side. If donors are actually have the incentive to choose what type of international organization is being the most effective in those areas. That's what they talked about how there will be more international criticism on those international organizations. But the reason behind it is that because donors are careful. But that if donors are so much careful, donors choose what type of organization they're actually funding. That can happen even on the side of the house. Those donors can still choose what type of local organization that they're actually going to fund. Cheap website accountability again. No response from their side of the house. To choose from my speech, firstly, exclusivity. I kind of did that interesting. But second, what type of exclusive change every someone else at the house, and how comparison, how our materials are important. For the first one, exclusivity. Again, no response from their side of the house. We have talked about how vast majority of materials were not exclusive. But the thing is that what remains in this debate is that how people lack trust towards these international organizations, right? And we totally can see that those lack of trust, colonization stuff, can happen on one side of the house. But the thing is that degree is totally different, right? We have given structural reason why that is much more likely to happen on one side of the house. We have given reasons why we talked, and they accuse opposition with and reply accuse us for us it's actually funded by actually funded by the West is nothing going to change, which is not true. Because with like the current situation, like when international organization operates in those areas, like money is funded. Like everything is funded by those Western organizations. Like they do activities and stuff. And, like they have this Western like symbol on their clothes, and like they're like literally foreigners trying to develop in those areas. And we have to give you an example of Ebola, right? That's actually important because like that's a very example that shows like if they